Section 20 of Psychology, the Cognitive Powers. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Ted Leinhart. Psychology, the Cognitive Powers by James McCosh. Section 3. The Use of the Imagination. The imagination has a noble purpose to serve. It widens the horizon of the mental vision. It fills the empty space which lies between the things that are seen, and it gives a peep into the void which lies beyond the visible sphere of knowledge. It thus expands the mind by expanding the boundary of thought and by opening an ideal outside the real world. It is also fitted to extend the field of enjoyment. It peoples the waste and supplies society in solitude. It enlarges the diminutive and elevates the low. It decorates the plain and illumines the dim. The cloud in the sky is composed of floating particles of moisture and would be felt as dripping mist if we entered it, but how beautiful does it look when glowing with the reflected light of the setting sun. Such is the power of fancy in gilding what would otherwise be felt to be dull and disagreeable. The imagination can do more than this. It can elevate the sentiments and the motive power of the mind by the pictures, fairer than any realities, which it presents. This faculty has purposes to serve even in science. The truth is, says D'Alembert, to the geometer who invents, imagination is not less essential than to the poet who creates. To the explorer in physical science, it suggests hypotheses wherewith to explain phenomena, and which, when duly adjusted and verified by facts, may at last be recognized as the very expression of the laws of nature. There was a fine fancy and exercise, as well as a great sagacity, when the poet Goethe discovered that all the appendages of plants, sepals, petals, stamens, and pistils, are after the leaf type, and thus laid a foundation on which scientific botany has been built. In every department of science, this faculty bridges over chasms between discovered truths and dives into depths in search for pearls and opens mines in which precious ores are found. May we not go farther and affirm that it is of service in the practical affairs of life? Always when subordinated to the judgment, not only does it supply devices to the inventive warrior, such as Napoleon Bonaparte, and suggest means of reaching unknown countries to the adventurer by sea or land. It helps the farmer to discover new modes of tilling his land, and discloses new openings in trade to the merchant. Need I add that it is the power which constructs those scenes which are embodied in the fine building or statue, which are made visible to us on the canvas of the painter, or which the poet enshrines in verse, as we have seen shrubs and flowers embedded in amber. Generally, those writings are the most widely diffused and universally popular which address this imaging power of the mind. At the head of this pictorial school is Sir Walter Scott, and after him we have a whole host of writers in history and in fiction. These authors do not content themselves with relating the bare incident. They set before us the actors, with all their accompaniments of locality, dress, manner, and attitude. This pictorial power illumines the book of knowledge and fills it, as it were, with prints and figures which allure on the reader from page to page without feeling his work to be a toil. This faculty, too, has the power of awakening sentiment deep and fervent, and here it will be needful to call attention to the circumstance that the very mental picture or representation of certain objects, say ourselves or others in circumstances of happiness or pain, is fitted to call forth feeling. The novel reader rejoices over the success of the hero of the tale as he would over the triumphs of a living man, and weeps over the misfortunes of the heroine as he would over a scene of actual misery. To account for this, it is alleged by some, as by D. Stewart, that there is a momentary belief in the reality of the object. I am not sure that it is necessary to resort to this supposition. It is the very mental picture or apprehension of persons exposed to happiness or suffering which calls forth the emotion, and this with or without a positive belief. No doubt, if unbelief come in, it will arrest the play of fancy and feeling, and unbelief will always interpose when the picture is unlike any reality, and hence it is needful for the novelist, the tragedian, and the actor to make the characters and accompaniments as natural as possible, lest the doubting judgment appear to scatter the images and with them the emotions. But if unbelief does not lay a cold interruption on the process, it seems to me that the mental representations, as they flow on, will of themselves draw along the corresponding train of feelings, whether of joy or sorrow, of sympathy or indignation. According, then, to the cherished imagination, so will be the prevailing sentiment. Low images will incite mean motives, and sooner or later land the person who indulges in them in the mire. Lustful pictures will foment licentious passions, which will hurry the individual, when occasion presents itself and permits, into the commission of the deed, to be remembered ever after, as Adam must have looked back upon the plucking of the forbidden fruit. Vain thoughts will raise around the man who creates them a succession of empty shows, in which he walks as the statues of the gods are carried in the processions before pagan temples. The perpetual dwelling on our supposed merits will produce a self-righteous character and a proud and disdainful mien and address. Gloomy thoughts will give a downward bend and look, and darken with their own hue the brightest prospects which life can disclose. Envious or malignant thoughts will sour the spirit and embitter the temper, and ever prompt to words of insinuation, innuendo, or disparagement, or to deeds of sulkiness, of malignity, or revenge. This is the darker side. On the other side, when the fancy is devoted to its intended use, it helps to cheer, to elevate, to ennoble the soul. It is in its proper exercise when it is picturing something better than we have ever yet realized, some grand ideal of excellence, and sets us forth on the attainment of it. All excellence, whether earthly or spiritual, has been attained by the mind keeping before it and dwelling upon the ideas of the great, the good, the beautiful, the grand, the perfect. The tradesman and mechanic attain to eminence by their never allowing themselves to rest till they can produce the most finished specimens of their particular work. The painter and sculptor travel to distant lands that they may see and, as it were, fill their eye and mind with the most beautiful models of their arts. Poets have had their yet undiscovered genius awakened into life as they contemplated some of the grandest of nature's scenes, or as they listened to the strains of other poets. The spirit of poetry has descended upon them, as the spirit of inspiration descended upon Elisha while the minstrel played before him. The soldier's spirit has been aroused, more than even by the stirring sound of the war trumpet, by the record of the courage and heroism of other warriors. The fervor of one patriot has been created as he listened to the burning words of another patriot, and many a martyr's zeal has been kindled at the funeral pile of other martyrs. In this way, fathers have handed down their virtues to their children, and parents have left their offspring a better legacy in their example than in all their wealth, and those who could leave them nothing else have in this example left them the very richest legacy. In this way, the good men of one age have influenced the characters of the men of another, and the deeds of those who have done great achievements have lived far longer than those who performed them and been transmitted from one generation to another. Section 4. The idea of the infinite. The imagination is strikingly illustrative both of the strength and weakness of the human intellect. There are stringent limits laid on its exercises. All the images of the fancy are only reproductions of what we have experienced. In using its materials, the mind can enlarge them to an infinite extent, but stretch itself as it may, the image is still finite. In expanding the image in space, it is incapable of doing more than representing to itself a volume with a distinct spherical boundary. In following its contemplation, in time the image is of a line of great length, but terminating in a point at each end. But where the mind is held in by its weakness, there it exhibits its strength. It can image to itself only this bounded sphere, this line cut at both ends, but it is led, or rather impelled, to believe in vastly more. At the point where it is obliged to stop, it takes a look, and that look is into infinity. Standing as it were on the shore of a vast ocean, it can see only so much, but it is constrained to believe that there is a region beyond that horizon to which no limits can be set. It is here that I find the origin and genesis of such an idea and belief as the mind can entertain of infinity. We are approaching a profound subject. It is not easy to sound its depths. It was long before I was able to attain to anything like clear ideas on the subject. I have pondered it for successive hours, only to find it shrouded in thicker clouds. On the one hand, I found the more profound philosophers of the continent of Europe, such as Anselm, Descartes, Leibniz, and Kant, giving this idea a high, indeed the highest place in their systems. In coming back from flights in company with these men, to inquire of Locke, Hamilton, and British philosophers what they make of this idea, I find their views meager and unsatisfactory, for the idea of the infinite, according to them, is a mere impotency in respect of the mental faculty and a negation as to the idea reached. But if we can entertain no such idea, how can we speak of it? If it be a mere impotency, how do we feel ourselves called on to clothe the divine being with his perfection? Feeling as if I needed to find it somewhere, I proceeded in the truly British method, that is, the inductive, to inquire how does such an idea of, or belief in, the infinite as the mind can entertain rise within us, and what is its precise nature. The imagination can add and add. So far we have the large, the indefinite. Thus, in respect of time, of which we have seen we have an idea by the recognitive power, it can add millions of years and ages to millions of years and ages. In respect of extension or space, which it knows by the senses, it can add millions and billions and trillions of leagues to millions and billions and trillions of leagues, and then multiply the results by each other millions of billions and trillions of times. But when it has finished this process, it has not infinity, it has merely immensity. If, when we had gone thus far, time and space were to cease, we should still have the finite, a very wide finite, but not the infinite. But it is a law, and it is a conviction of the mind, that even when we have gone thus far, we are necessitated to believe that to whatever other point we go, there must be something beyond. Such seems to me to be the true character of the mind's conviction as to the infinite. The infinite, as apprehended by man, may be regarded as having two elements, or rather may be viewed under two aspects. One, the infinite is always something beyond our widest image and conception. The mind strives to form an image of infinity, but as it does so, it is always baffled and thrown back. It can easily picture a sphere as wide as that of the Earth's movement around the sun, and try to image that vast orbit in which our sun moves. Let us stretch the imagination thus far as the most distant point which the largest telescope reaches, as far as the star which requires thousands or hundreds of thousands of years to send its rays across the immeasurable regions which intervene. Are we then at the farthest limits of existence? Can we believe that we are? Suppose we were carried to such a point, would we not stretch out our hand, confidently believing that there is a space beyond? Or if our hand be hindered, it must be by a body occupying space. We are necessitated to believe that when we have gone thus far, we are not at the outer edge of the universe of being. Nay, though we were to multiply this distance by itself 10,000 millions of times, till the imagination feels dizzy and reeling, still, after we have reached that point, we are constrained to believe that there must be something beyond. This seems to me to be the law of the mind in reference to infinity. It not only cannot set limits to existence, it is constrained to believe that there are no limits. If the mind, says John Foster, were to arrive at the solemn ridge of mountains which we may fancy to bound creation, it would eagerly ask, why no farther? What is beyond? 2. The infinite is such that nothing can be added to it. We may farther say that nothing can be taken from it. It is the perfect. All that we know by our highest faculties and in our most elevated moods is seen to be limited, and in this sense, and it may be others, it is imperfect. But amid all the excellencies and evils before it, it is ever looking out for that which has no deficiencies. So whatever is known to us as great and good, we stretch to the uttermost and combine all in one, and would unite almighty power, omnipresence, eternity, omniscience, boundless goodness, and spotless holiness, all in this perfect one. The mind is made to acknowledge that it cannot compass all this, but is expanded in the endeavor to comprehend it. The imagination loses itself as in a forest, but we feel all the while that we are safe wherever we are, in the immensity of space or time or eternity, in this world or in worlds unknown. I have been speaking of our rudimentary faith in the unseen and the distant. We have now come to a faith in what cannot be transcended. We have now a grand ideal set before us to contemplate, and though, like the pole star, it is far above us, it is there to guide us. We are ever drawn towards it, and as the asymptotes of the hyperbola ever draw nearer, while they never touch each other, so we would ever approach that model which is yet ever above us. This second aspect of infinity is the grander and the more important. This was the feature brought into prominence by Anselm, the great medieval philosopher and theologian. It was the one fixed on by Descartes, the founder of the French philosophy, and by Leibniz, the originator of the German philosophy. We find the germ of it, ready to be expanded, in the minds of all men, if we go sufficiently far down. We strike upon it in all our deeper reasonings in regard to divine things. The profound philosophers just named argued from the very existence of such an idea in the soul that there must be a corresponding object and that therefore God exists. Whatever may be thought of the validity of this argument, it is certain that there is such a rudimentary idea in the mind and that it is ever prompting us to seek after God and enabling and constraining us when we get evidence of the existence of God, say from the traces of design in nature, to clothe him with infinity. This second aspect of the infinite is not inconsistent with the first, but is complementary to it. Combine the two, and we have such a view as man can entertain of the infinite. By the one aspect, he is humbled under a sense of inferiority. By the other, he is elevated as he gazes on it. Certainly, man's idea of the infinite is not an adequate one. He is made to feel so as he entertains it, but it is not a negative idea or a mere impotency, as Locke and the British School of Philosophy hold. It has positive elements in it, and man is never more exalted than when he is seeking to rise to it. The belief may be regarded as an intuitive one. In our deeper moods, we find ourselves gazing on it. It is a necessary one. We cannot be made to think otherwise. It is, in a sense, a universal conviction. No doubt the widest image formed by human beings, as by children and savages, must be very confined, but narrow or wide, we feel that there must always be something beyond. Pursue any line sufficiently far, and we find it going out into infinity. So true is it, as Shelley says, the feeling of the boundless bounds, all feeling, as the welkin doth the world. But the infinite, which the mind is led to believe in, is not an abstraction. It is a belief in something infinite. So when the visible things of God declare that there is an intelligent being, the author of all the order and purpose in the universe, the mind is constrained to believe that he is infinite and clothes him with eternal power and Godhead. End of section 20.